We're studying Isaiah. Lesson 2 this week, Crisis in Leadership. And the text here says, when he, and it's talking about King Uzziah, when he had become strong, he grew proud to his destruction. There is a possible bad outcome of success, and that is pride, the wrong kind of pride. And that pride can usually eventually leads people to reach too far and causes their downfall. Now, is there anything wrong with becoming powerful in and of itself?
Becoming what?
Powerful. It says the NIV does it this way: after Uzziah became powerful, strong, his pride led to his downfall. Now, we can talk about strong leaders and we can talk about weak leaders. Now, let's talk about a weak leader first. Isn't that almost a contradiction in terms? Because if you are weak, are you going to lead anybody? You know, there are people that kind of approach leadership by sticking their finger up in the air and trying to determine what everybody wants and then go along with that. And they may appear to be leading, but they're really not leading. And there is another other extreme, is the leader who simply tells you the way it's going to be and expects you to follow. Now, that is an example of a strong leader.
And a dictator.
It's also a dictator. Now, so I'm looking for here positive ways that a leadership can exhibit strength and negative ways that a leader can exhibit strength. Is it always wrong for a person to dictate?
Not always. Sometimes there's a crisis and you need somebody to tell people what to do, and you got to make the decisions quick and you got to just put it in order.
Right. When you are following, in that case, you're following well thought out plans, and it's not time to sit around and discuss what to do. It's not time to say, well, you know, I'm not sure that's the best thing to do at this point. In a crisis, if you've done crisis planning, there are certain steps to take, and you take those steps automatically. And it's good to have a strong leader there who can say, do it. Who can call the phone numbers and get people to respond. Now, when would dictating become a negative thing for a leader?
When it's not in the best interest of the people.
When it's not in the best interest of the majority, right? Often, go ahead.
When the guy with the least amount of intelligence tries to lead.
it sometimes is tempting, and many leaders fall into this temptation of using your leadership position to get your way. Now, a lot of people use it to get financially wealthy because there's inside knowledge when you're a leader, and you can leverage that knowledge to get wealthy if you want to. If I knew, for instance, that there was a piece of property over here that some company was looking to buy to build a factory on, and I bought it from the current owner and then sat on it for a little while, and then when these people come, I made them pay a lot of money, and I made a lot of money in the that would be a smart buy, wouldn't it? Now, too often leaders get caught up in using their leadership for their benefit, and they forget that they were, in most cases, our leaders are elected to serve their electorate. So we generally tend to look down on the dictator method, but there are some times in which that is good. So we don't want leadership to be in the position where they simply think they can get their own way. Now, how do we prevent those that we've elected? If somebody gets off into that side, the negative side of leadership, and they start becoming a dictator because they'd like to get their own way, how do we correct that?
Voting for someone else the next time?
Next time the opportunity comes, don't vote for that person. That corrects it. And there are also opportunities occasionally to throw people out of the positions in which they've been elected. Too often we elect a leader and then blindly follow that person. And in that case, we're not doing our job. We can blame the leader, but we're not doing our job. It was once said that in Canada, Pierre Trudeau, kept getting elected time after time after time, but they could never find anybody that said they voted for him. He wasn't that popular, but he kept getting elected. How does that happen? It happens when people give up their responsibilities and just blindly follow a leader.
Or voter fraud.
Could be, but it's extremely difficult to pull off a large-scale voter fraud particularly on a national level. You can maybe rig a local election. So any other thoughts here on characteristics that a strong leader should demonstrate as opposed to negative characteristics?
Well, if you're not talking about the political world, the strong leader of the church should be strong in God and their relationship with God.
Okay. Yeah. When people are elected a leader, sometimes a leader has to take an oath of office. Our president takes an oath of office. And what do they promise to do?
Uphold the Constitution.
They promise to uphold the Constitution. So we as electorates need to demand that they do that. And a person who is in a church leadership position maybe hasn't taken any kind of oath or anything, but they need to be people who have a relationship with God and people who uphold the Bible. That's their constitution. So in a business setting, it would be somebody who has pledged to follow the ideals, the business statement, what do they call it? The mission statement of the organization that they have been elected to lead. Go ahead.
Why was Uzziah a successful king?
To start out with.
Yeah, it says he was successful. Why was he successful?
Yeah, he grew strong. Okay.
Well, why was he strong?
Well, I think in the beginning of his kingship, he was actually following God. But then becoming strong, that led to pride. And pride takes your focus off God or anything else and puts it on yourself. And then when you are left to your own devices, we're very good at muddling things up. So when he turned away from God, God actually gave him leprosy. And so he lived in a separate house, and his son took over the daily business of being king. Is that
Yeah. So
an answer to your question?
Oh yeah, verse 4 tells us that.
Yeah.
He did everything that was right in the eyes of the Lord.
Yeah.
And eventually, at the end of his life, he pulled away from God, and his success became, as you said, his own. It was all about him. It wasn't about God.
Yeah.
So I think when we look at King Uzziah's example, the key characteristic to leadership, no matter what position you hold, is truly your relationship with God. It doesn't matter if you're a pastor, it doesn't matter if you're a nurse, a doctor, if you are a janitor, a CEO, whatever form of leadership you have, the relationship with God is key. Because as soon as you make it about yourself, you end up doing what Uzziah did, where he thought that, hey, I can go into the temple, I can do what I want. And as soon as the priest came and told him, you can't do that, and he still went ahead and did it anyway, and the punishment came down.
Yeah. Go ahead.
You know, when you said you gave him leprosy, I don't like that interpretation. In a lot of places, God, I think he just took his saving power.
Yeah. Yeah.
He took over.
That may be true. The Bible often attributes God as having done things which we know he doesn't do, but that's how they viewed things. It had to be done by somebody, and they often thought of God as doing everything, good and bad. We understand a little bit clearer today, I think, who God is in that regard. So I remember, and I've mentioned this before, I remember back when when George W. Bush II, when George W. Bush was running for president, and they asked him in one of the debates, who is your favorite philosopher? And he said, Jesus Christ, because he saved my life, changed my life. And that night on Chris Matthews, hardball, he was having just a fit, why would he introduce religion into politics? But if religion means anything, it fits into everything. And so we shouldn't distrust a religious president. Okay, there's religion and there's religion. We should not distrust a president or a leader who has a relationship with God, because that will make them a better leader in business, in a school, in a church, in a community. Any other thoughts that you have on leadership?
Now, is it possible that a leader can use the name of God and then later on, like, clearly you can see that the actions is totally opposite of God? Because there are leaders like that as well,
Yeah,
just using the name of God.
yeah. Certain the Muslim fundamentalists have become very good at using Islam to further what have nothing to do with Islam religion. And so, yeah, just because somebody has found that, there's a picture I see of Bill Clinton walking to church with his Bible in his hand. And I'm sure that as he went out the door, one of his aides handed him the Bible, because this was a picture that they wanted to present. Person walking to church with their Bible. Ordinarily, I don't think he went to church a whole lot. So we do need leaders. We do need strong leaders. And if those leaders are elected leaders, we need to hold them accountable. The idea that you've elected me leader, now I get to tell you what to do, is part of our problem. There is a sense in which you've elected somebody a leader. You support them by following them, but we need to do our part as well. If we don't, the chances that leader will become prideful increase a lot. When a leader isn't held accountable, it is very likely that they will become very proud and turn inward.
I think that admiring the philosophy of Jesus versus someone immediately saying, why is he using religion? They're not even the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And he should have been called on that. It's when we start throwing around the term religion, religious, that we're just deliberately being negative about those who love God.
Mm-hmm.
It's warning us, and that's really kind of what's not okay.
Yeah.
It's like when we say they about the Muslims, they, and then make a general statement. They aren't all bad. They aren't all wicked. They aren't.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we do that?
Yeah. Once again, it's important that we define what we're talking about. Religious doesn't mean simply going to church once a week. That's often the way it's defined by many people. But when we talk about religious, we really want to infer that people have a relationship with God. Now, let's talk about the antidote to pride. What keeps us from becoming proud? There are people who are very accomplished, who have been very successful. And for them to say that they had nothing to do with it would be a lie. Most people who have become very successful have worked very hard to get where they've gotten. So there is a danger that they can become proud. I heard a man once. He was a businessman and he was pretty successful, and his attitude was, toward the poor, was they should get a job and work hard and do what I've done. Well, can everybody be a business owner? I mean, I don't think so, you know. Can everybody receive the pay of a doctor? I mean, does a job that you can learn in 3 days require or deserve the same pay as somebody who has to continually go back and study to keep their profession? So there's opportunity for pride in success. Now, some people's antidote for that is, I won't be successful. And there's some people that are afraid of success and consciously avoid it. And they consciously avoid letting people know they're successful. So, you know, we'll have a game, but I don't want there to be any winners in the game. Because if there's a winner in the game, that means you were successful and you may get proud. Well, what is the antidote to pride then?
Humility. Being humbled, I guess.
What keeps us humble? That's what I'm asking. What keeps us from getting proud?
Remembering our failures, because if you don't try, you can't succeed or fail.
Okay. Remembering our failure. What if we're one of these very few people that just don't seem to ever fail? They seem to have success at whatever they try. Are they still a fallible human being? Yeah. So remembering that we're fallible human beings, we're just a human, we're not God. Sure.
I think the antidote to pride is
Ah, yeah.
gratitude. Gratitude.
Gratitude for what? Gratitude to God for everything. So recognizing that if it wasn't for God, say somebody who's very successful, if it wasn't for God, I wouldn't have had the success that I had. If it wasn't for God, I wouldn't have achieved what I have. Now, I've heard some people who stand up for an acceptance speech and award show and thank God. Is that appropriate? I think it is. It's almost shocking to hear it. But certainly it's appropriate to thank God in all circumstances. And I think also says dwelling on the cross will protect us from the pitfall of pride. Understanding gratitude, in other words, for what Jesus has done for us. So when our leaders don't have that, or when they start moving away from that, it's perhaps our responsibility to remind them of it. And there. So, third topic that I'd like to go into. It says here are a number of places. God encouraged Israel by showing the prophet that he was still in control. God is in control, we say. For sure, Isaiah now knew who was in control, despite outward events. And then, like Isaiah, they needed special comfort and encouragement that God was still in charge. What do we mean when we say God is in control, God is in charge? Some people think it means that everything that happens happens because God chooses it to happen. And so if that's true, what choices do I have? Some people believe that the people who are saved are those who God chooses to be saved, and the people who are lost are those that God chooses to be lost. If that's true, what good is my choice?
You should just be thankful. If that's the way you want to believe, he chose me. I'm thankful.
Yeah, well, good. That's not so good for everybody else who he didn't choose. What does it mean then? What does it mean that God is in control? That God is in charge? We sometimes say, I don't understand, but I know it's part of his plan. As if, again, he is causing it to happen. And I don't believe that a lot that happens on this earth is caused by God. I think a lot is caused because people intentionally choose not to go God's way. People will say when they get sick, well, I don't know what God's plan is for this, but I trust that he has given it to me for a reason. Now, God's plan is always to bring good out of all circumstances, but he doesn't bring all circumstances. So what do we mean when we say God is in control?
You know how the story ends.
We know the outcome. We know the ultimate outcome. We know that there is a goal toward which God is working, and that goal will occur. There will be a second coming. There will be a recreation of this earth back to its original state, populated by those who have chosen to befriend God or have accepted his friendship of them. So we know the outcome,
It's the Alpha and the Omega.
beginning and the end. He's began life, and he will always be there with life. Okay, very good. Any other ideas?
I think that God is only in control as much as in my life, as much as I allow him to.
Yeah,
And so I don't even know how to put that on a huge scale,
yeah.
on a world scale, on a national scale. I don't even know how to get there because it's up to every individual. So is it up to our prayer petitions? Is it up to, what is it that, because he's only, can only control what we allow him to control.
Yeah. So, we like to tell missionary stories about the missionary who's in this foreign country, and the natives are very upset because the witch doctor has got them all upset, and they're going to kill him. And so it's always at night, it seems. And so they go to the missionary's hut. It's always a hut. And they surround the hut, but then they go running away. And in the morning, there's these stories about, we can't attack the missionary. His soldiers are too strong for us. What about the cases where that doesn't happen? Oh, no, we don't want to talk about them. We don't want to talk about the missionaries that went to South America and were never seen again, all wiped out within 24, 48 hours of their arrival. We don't want to talk about that. But that's reality. Sometimes God is able to miraculously protect his followers, and sometimes he's not.
What was in the mind and heart of that missionary in those moments? Did he trust God to save him, or did he say they're going to kill him?
Yeah, it could be, lack of faith on the part of the missionary.
Well, if you're going to observe what happened to Daniel's friends, they said, God can save us. And if he can save us, we still trust him. And God saved them. Now looking to John the Baptist, he wasn't saved. He was killed. Can we tell that he's not with God? So,
Yeah.
those circumstances.
And you saw the faith in the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Even if he doesn't, we're not going to obey you, King.
Yeah, I think we have to be careful in saying we truly don't know what's in their hearts, whether they'll be protected or saved. We can't tell. I mean, I can think of even this past year, in COVID, I had a friend who lost his father, and to say that his family didn't have enough faith to believe that he would be saved, from COVID. I can't say that.
Yeah.
And to tell him, to go and tell him that would be devastating to him. It's because you didn't believe enough that you probably just did it. I don't want to say that. And I'm not saying that anyone else is saying that, but we have to be really careful.
Yeah.
If we're going to go that route, we have to be consistent in going that route. So then we would have to say to Jesus, the reason Judas betrayed you and did not accept fully your invitation that last night is because you, Jesus, did not have enough faith. And that would be very a crazy statement to make.
I think the whole thing with God is in control, that whole question, and maybe this is a cop-out answer, but this is me trying to deal with all of this as a learner and trying to deal with life as a learner, pre or post-COVID. Sometimes crap happens, excuse my language, and the only answer to any of that is we are living in a sinful world.
Yep.
And because we made that choice, we didn't make that choice, but Adam and Eve made that choice. God has to allow some sin to play out, because otherwise there would be no consequence for us choosing sin, and not just us, but thousands of generations of humans at this point in time. He has to allow the great controversy to play out.
Mhm.
So he can't, in some ways, God isn't in complete control. He can't just fix everything for us, because then he wouldn't be allowed the full story to play out.
Now, in one sense, God is in complete control and never once does anything out of that control happen. And that is, God is in complete control of himself. Now, we would like to think that we are in complete control of ourselves, but do you ever do something that just was totally bonkers? And it was like, where did that come from? Did I choose it? No, I was just out of control. That's human nature, is it not? Is God ever out of control of himself? God is always in control of himself. And so that gives us the assurance that he can always be depended upon to be who he is. You know, we would like to think that we can all depend on each other to be who we are, but we know better. We know if we really sit down and think about it, we know better. We know that we are going to disappoint each other. We don't like it when we're disappointed, but we know we will do it, so we know others will do it, right? And it may be our expectations that are to blame, but humans simply aren't totally in control of themselves, but God is. And because God is totally in control of himself, then we can totally rely on him to be who he is. So he's the one solid ground that there is. So I think that is what we need to focus on when we think about God is in control. He's in control of himself. He's in control of what he is. He never wavers over what he's trying to accomplish. People waver, you know. If love doesn't work, I'll try hatred. Right? We'll try whatever, but God doesn't. God is love, and he will always try love and nothing else. God respects your freedom of choice and will never interfere with that. And again, that's something I love for myself. I just don't like it for you. Because when you have freedom of choice, you can hurt me. I don't like that.
I listened to a missionary tell his story at the Baptist Church in Rock Falls. And he does things that were scary stupid. And he just has this faith, and he gets into these countries and past these people and gets Bibles and God into the most amazing places.
Mm-hmm.
So now he's in Turkey. And some people have turned on him, and they're very dangerous. And he goes to get bread, and it's getting dark, and he can't be out at dark. And here they come for him with lead pipes. And he runs, and they chase him. And now he is choosing in that moment to run into the traffic because he prefers that way to what they have in store for him. And as he's going to step into traffic, he remembers he forgot to call God into the situation. And in that moment, when he calls on God, everything stops. And he turns, and they're looking in terror at him. They drop the lead pipes, and they run the other way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting that someone who had so depended on God to do just amazing things, in that moment, he said, I forgot. That's the one thing.
Yeah.
I forgot. And the minute he called him in, he was never bothered again. And oh man, he takes his wife and his daughters. He's got this faith that just.
And so here's Elijah on Mount Carmel. Tremendous example of faith. One against how many of the ministers of the opponent, the opposition were there? But then he hears Jezebel's going to kill you. And he goes running for hundreds of miles, many days. So this is again who we are as people. We can't depend on ourselves because we aren't in control sometimes. But God is always in control. We're often under the control of circumstances. Circumstances play us. We can't do what we want to do because of circumstances. God is not affected by circumstances. God does what God does because He is God and there is no other way. So, we have that. Under Wednesday's lesson, whom shall I send? And who will go for us? Then said I, here I am, send me. That's kind of very stilted English, but God says, who am I going to send? And who will work for us? And Isaiah responds, I will. Now, it's interesting. This was a little bit later this is Isaiah 6 already. Isaiah certainly had already chosen to follow God, but God comes again and asks, who am I going to send? And gives him a choice. And he responds, I am. Why is a person, and we call that a calling often. Why is a person called?
Because they're needed, like Moses.
Because there's a need. Does God have needs? There's tremendous needs in the world.
So in that way, everybody can be called any moment of any day. So the calling to be a pastor versus the calling just to be something simple, but somebody needs something.
Yeah, there have been people who I think are really sensitive to God speaking to them, who have been impressed as they're driving to stop and knock on a door. And there was a need. And God says, no problem, I've got somebody I can call. And fortunately, that person responded to the call, even though they didn't know what the need was, and they met the need. So, what does that tell us we need to, what mentality do we have to have on a day-to-day basis, a moment-to-moment basis?
We need to be ready and we need to be listeners.
Yeah. Like I said again, that this video that I showed of the kids playing the pop bottle instruments. And my reaction to looking at it was, wow, they're creative. But someone else's reaction to it was really much more beneficial to them. Hey, they want to play instruments they don't have. Let's get them instruments so they can have them. Now, she was working also on getting them a really good New Year's Day feast. In fact, they had sent the money and they had gone shopping, and eventually, hopefully, there's promised to be a video of their New Year meal. So hopefully we'll have that soon. Because their daily food is cornmeal mixed with water. That's what they normally have on a day-to-day basis. So certainly I need to be much more perceptive when these things occur, rather than simply analyzing it and saying, oh, they're creative. That doesn't help them any. Yeah, they're creative, great.
But I kind of feel that way sometimes at Christmas when all of a sudden this underserved population of children in our communities, we make sure that they have a Christmas present and we make sure that whatever. But every other day of the year, we need to serve this underserved population.
Mm-hmm.
You know, New Year's Eve feast is wonderful, but then there's January 2nd and 3rd and 4th, and how to get a steady stream of
Yeah.
of help to these people.
Yeah. And not, but it didn't stop with the instruments. It went to the food, and then she's also considering how to provide better housing. Now, most of the time, I would take the attitude, what can I do? But somebody took the attitude, I can do something. And I don't know who she worked with. Part of it was money that has come into her foundation, but who she worked with to bring it about. But we can do a lot more than we think we can do if we are being open to that kind of thing.
Who said we can't all do great things?
Yeah.
We can all do small things.
And many small things add up to a lot. What if we were to go around and just ask for a penny donation from everybody in the country? Just one penny.
I know.
Anybody's got a penny, I suppose, and there's nothing else they can do with the penny. I don't even know if there's a gumball machines that take pennies any longer. I think they take nickels or dimes. So everybody gave a penny. We have 300 million people. How much money is that? $3 million. And things have been done with that. The church in Battle Creek, Michigan was built because they asked kids to give dimes, and they named it the Dime Tabernacle. God does not want any to perish, which explains why he sent Isaiah to the people of Judah and Jesus to the world. God's desire is not to destroy, but to save eternally. But while some people respond positively to his appeals, others become firmer in their resistance. Have you ever had the experience of reaching out in friendship to somebody and creating an enemy? It happens. Some people respond to friendship with anger for whatever reasons they have. Have you ever done a favor for somebody and made them angry? Some people respond to good in a negative way. When when Moses went to Pharaoh and said, "Let my people go," this is what God says, "Let my people go." What did God want Pharaoh to do? Let the people go. But Pharaoh's response to the message was to become firmer anti-God. And so that resulted in the second and the third and the 10th plague. You know, and Pharaoh hadn't even learned his lesson by then, because after they had buried their dead and 2 or 3 days went by, they're like, "We lost all our slaves. What are we going to do? We'd have to work ourselves. We can't have that." So they went chasing after them into the Red Sea, where they didn't belong. And they were all drowned. So it's important that, once again, we understand that fire has different effects depending on the material. Some it softens, some it hardens. It depends on the material. And we have choices that we can respond to God and allow Him to soften us, or we can respond to God in a way that hardens us. Ultimately, there's only two groups of people on earth. There's those who are willing to go with God, and there's those who are wishing for death. Who makes that decision? Each individual. You know, we talk about the judgment as if God is deciding, "Yeah, I know you want to go to heaven, but you're not good enough yet, so you can't go." Is that the way it is? Ultimately, it just comes to two groups of people: those who will go and those who won't go. And does God exclude any of those who are willing to go? I don't believe so. So we need to make the choices that will result in the best lives for ourselves. And that is choosing God, choosing to answer His call when He calls us, choosing to respond, choosing to allow ourselves to be melted by His love.
Actually, I was thinking, why is it that God gave 7 plagues? Why not only one? For me, it's God's grace as well to the Egyptian people, because He showed to them His power. They can actually, turn their hearts to God.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking, actually, it would be hard actually not to be saved than to be saved, because you continuously need to reject God in order for you not to be saved.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that? God is so loving that He is giving us these opportunities to decide for Him. Like Noah, giving Noah time to preach for so many years, and all these circumstances. It's God's grace, giving us time and chances to decide for Him.
And it's giving us opportunities to build in faith, because they didn't need a whole lot of faith living as a slaves when somebody tells you what to do every day. But then they were taken out of slavery, given their freedom, and now they needed a lot of faith. And they had these 10 plague opportunities to develop faith. They had the miracles that occurred in the wilderness to develop faith. And they came to enter the promised land and they hadn't developed the faith.
I think maybe your two groups are the group that understands love and grace. And the group that just doesn't. They just don't.
Yeah.
They're something.
Yeah,
something wrong.
I think so.